The salvage beacon lit up Commander Thexal's console at 0400 hours, pulling him from a restless sleep. He stared at the coordinates with his 4 eyes, each blinking independently as his brain processed the information. The outer reach was a graveyard of failed expeditions and lost ships. Most salvage operations there recovered nothing but frozen corpses and broken dreams. But this signal was different. It came from the Meridian's Hope, a colony vessel that had vanished 3 standard years ago without a trace. Thexal's scales rippled across his torso, a physical reaction his species couldn't control when something felt wrong. The ship hadn't just disappeared. The Galactic Council had actively searched for it. Hundreds of vessels had scoured the space lanes. They found nothing. Now suddenly, here it was, drifting near the settlements like a ghost returning home. He assembled his crew within the hour. 23 experienced salvage operators, each veteran of countless recovery missions. They had pulled survivors from ships that had been adrift for months. They had documented disasters that had killed thousands. Nothing in the job description scared them anymore, or so they believed. The Meridian's Hope appeared on their view screen as they approached. The colony ship hung in the void like a tomb. No running lights, no heat signature, no radio signals. The hull showed evidence of severe damage along the starboard side. Thexal's sensors indicated a complete loss of main power. Life support was offline. The ship's interior temperature registered at -40 degrees. "Any life signs?" Thexal asked his sensor operator. The young Krelix named Vexon studied his screens carefully. His antennae twitched as he processed the data. "Sir, I'm getting something. It's very faint. Could be a sensor ghost or equipment malfunction. The reading doesn't make sense." "Show me." Vexon transferred the data to the main display. A single weak biosign pulsed in the cargo section of the derelict vessel. The readings indicated a humanoid life form. Small, juvenile, possibly, but the ship had been dead for 3 years. Nothing could survive that long without heat, food, or breathable air. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," Thexal ordered. "That has to be a false reading." The diagnostic came back clean. The equipment was functioning perfectly. The impossible life sign remained. Thexal made the decision. "We're going in. Full environmental suits. Assume hostile conditions. And stay alert. Something about this doesn't feel right." The boarding team moved through the airlock with practiced efficiency. Their helmet lights cut through the absolute darkness inside the Meridian's Hope. Frost covered every surface. The walls glittered with ice crystals. The air inside was so cold it would freeze exposed skin in seconds. They moved in formation, checking corners and sealed doors. The ship was a maze of corridors and compartments. Emergency lighting had failed completely. The only illumination came from their suits. Every breath created clouds of vapor inside their helmets. The sound of their boots on the frozen deck plates echoed through empty passages. "This is wrong," whispered Sha'ara, Thexal's second officer. She was a Venturi, a species known for their exceptional intuition. "I feel something. A presence. We're not alone here." Thexal trusted her instincts. In 12 years of working together, Sha'ara had never been wrong about danger. "Weapons ready. Stay tight." They found the first bodies in the crew quarters. Humans, frozen in their bunks or collapsed in corridors. The disaster had struck quickly. Most showed no signs of struggle. They had simply died when the atmosphere vented. Thexal counted 47 bodies in the first section alone. All human, all long dead. The ship's layout indicated a crew and passenger complement of just over 200. The cargo bay was their destination. That's where the mysterious life sign originated. They moved carefully through the frozen vessel, documenting what they found. More bodies. Blast damage from the initial catastrophe. Signs of desperate attempts at repair. Someone had tried to save the ship. Emergency patches covered holes in the hull. Temporary seals had been applied to damaged sections. But it hadn't been enough. The Meridian's Hope had died anyway, taking all its passengers and crew with it, except for one impossible life sign. The cargo bay doors were sealed, but not locked. Thexal's team forced them open with hydraulic tools. The massive space beyond was dark and cold like everything else. Their lights swept across containers and equipment. Standard colony supplies. Nothing unusual. Then, Sha'ara gasped. Her light had found something in the back corner. "Commander, you need to see this." Now, Thexal hurried to her position. His lights joined hers, illuminating a scene that made no sense. 3 massive shapes lay on the frozen deck, even dead and covered in frost. They were magnificent and terrifying. Each creature measured roughly 4 meters from snout to tail. Midnight black fur with distinctive blue markings covered their bodies, 6 powerful legs ending in retractable claws, heads the size of cargo containers, featuring rows of crystalline teeth that could shear through metal. "Blessed ancestors," Thexal breathed. His translator struggled to convey the reverence and terror in his voice. Vorashian hunting beasts. Every member of the crew took an involuntary step backward. Even dead and frozen, the creatures commanded respect and fear. Vorashians were legendary throughout the galaxy. They came from Vorash Prime, a death world so hostile that the Galactic Council had quarantined the entire system 2 centuries ago. The planet's gravity was crushing. Its atmosphere was toxic. Its native life forms were universally hostile and deadly. Vorashians sat at the apex of that world's brutal food chain. They were intelligent pack hunters with strength enough to tear apart armored vehicles. They possessed sensory abilities that made them nearly impossible to evade. They could track prey across continents. They never gave up once they caught a scent. And they were absolutely, completely, mercilessly efficient killers. Adult Vorashians had been observed taking down creatures 10 times their size through coordinated pack tactics. They had destroyed military installations on worlds foolish enough to try capturing them. There were documented cases of a single Vorashian killing dozens of armed soldiers before being brought down. The Galactic Council's laws regarding Vorashians were strict and absolute. No one transported them off their home world. No one tried to capture them. No one studied them except from orbit with long-range sensors. The penalty for violating these laws was life imprisonment without possibility of parole. What were 3 fully grown Vorashians doing on a human colony ship? Vexen asked. His voice carried a tremor of fear. Thexal had no answer. But something about the scene bothered him. The positioning was wrong. The creatures hadn't died in combat or while hunting. They weren't scattered or aggressive. They lay in a deliberate semicircle, their bodies oriented toward something. "The life sign," Sha'ara said quietly. "It's coming from behind them. They're positioned like they're guarding something." Thexal moved closer despite every instinct screaming at him to maintain distance. Dead or not, approaching a Vorashian felt like approaching certain death. His lights revealed more details. The creature's fur was matted and dull. Their bodies looked thin beneath the thick pelts. These were not healthy animals. These were creatures that had suffered. "Scanning," Vexen reported. "The life sign is definitely behind them. Humanoid, small, juvenile size. It's faint but steady. A child?" Thexal felt his blood chill beyond what the frozen air could explain. "There's a human child alive on this ship?" They moved carefully around the dead Vorashians. Up close, the creatures were even more imposing. Each tooth was longer than Thexal's hand. The claws could have disemboweled him with a casual swipe. The powerful muscles beneath the fur suggested strength beyond measure. But the Vorashians had positioned themselves deliberately. Their bodies formed a windbreak. They blocked the corridor's mouth where cold air would flow. They created a shelter with their own mass. Inside that shelter, in a small maintenance alcove, they found her. A human child lay wrapped in dozens of thermal blankets. Emergency heating packs surrounded her small form. Some were still faintly warm, their chemical reactions not yet exhausted. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Dark hair, matted with frost. Skin pale from cold and malnutrition. Lips tinged blue. But her chest rose and fell with shallow, regular breaths. She was alive. "This is impossible," Sha'ara whispered. "The ship's been dead for 3 years. 3 years. How is she breathing? How is she not frozen solid?" Thexal scanned the alcove carefully. His handheld device analyzed everything: atmosphere composition, temperature gradients, thermal efficiency. The results made him blink all four eyes in succession. "The Vorashians," he said slowly. "Look at their positioning. They're not just guarding her. They created a microenvironment. Their bodies block the worst of the cold air. The alcove they chose has the best insulation in this section. And these heating packs, some of them are only a few months old. Someone was maintaining her survival. But everyone else on this ship is dead, Commander," Vexen pointed out. "We've confirmed that. Who could have been caring for her?" "I know," Thexal said. A theory was forming in his mind, but it seemed impossible. Ridiculous even. Unless... He returned to examine the Vorashians more closely. Now that he looked with specific intent, he saw details he had missed. The creatures hadn't died from cold exposure. They hadn't suffocated when the atmosphere failed. They had died from starvation. Their bodies told the story. Beneath the thick fur, they were emaciated. Every rib was visible. Their haunches were hollow where muscle had wasted away. These creatures had used every last bit of energy their bodies could provide. They had burned through fat reserves, then muscle tissue. They had pushed their biology beyond its limits. They protected her, Thexal realized. His voice carried awe and disbelief in equal measure. Even as they starved, even as the ship died around them, they used their own body heat to keep her warm. They gathered heating packs from throughout the ship. They shielded her from the worst conditions. "That's impossible," Sha'ara insisted. "Vorashians are killing machines, Commander. They're apex predators. Non-sentient. Driven purely by hunting instinct. They eat anything smaller than themselves. A human child should have been prey, not something to protect." Thexal looked at the small girl again. She lay in the shelter created by three of the galaxy's most feared predators. Creatures that every civilized species feared. Monsters that haunted the nightmares of military commanders. And somehow, impossibly, they had kept her alive. "Get her to the medical bay immediately," Thexal ordered. "Use extreme care. Handle her like she's made of crystal. And I want every piece of data from this ship's computers recovered. Every log file. Every security recording. Every scrap of information. I need to know what happened here. I need to understand how this is possible." The medical team worked with desperate efficiency. They carefully transported the girl to their ship's medical facility. They connected her to monitors and life support systems. They administered nutrients and carefully raised her body temperature. Every procedure was gentle, cautious, aware that they were dealing with a fragile miracle. Thexal watched through the medical bay window as the doctors worked. The girl remained unconscious. Her vital signs were weak but stable. She had survived conditions that should have killed her within days, let alone years. The medical team couldn't explain it. Nothing in their experience prepared them for this. Back on the Meridian's Hope, the data recovery team went to work. The ship's main computer was damaged but not destroyed. Storage drives were intact. Protected by radiation shielding, they extracted terabytes of information. Logs, recordings, personal files, everything. It took 2 days to process all the data. Thexal barely slept. He reviewed files constantly, searching for answers. The story that emerged was extraordinary, impossible, and absolutely true. The Meridian's Hope had departed from the human colonial sector 8 months before disaster struck. Manifest records showed 217 passengers and crew. They were heading for a newly approved settlement world. Standard colony mission. Nothing unusual about it, except for one detail buried in the cargo manifest. Special research containers in the secured hold. Contents: 3 juvenile Vorashian specimens. Authorization code. Galactic Council scientific exception. Permit 7743H. Responsible party: Dr. Marcus Chen, xenobiologist. Thexal pulled Dr. Chen's personnel file. The human had been brilliant by any species standards. He held advanced degrees in xenobiology, behavioral science, and evolutionary theory. His specialty was studying dangerous alien species. He had written papers on predator psychology that were considered groundbreaking across multiple civilizations. Dr. Chen had somehow obtained permission to transport 3 Vorashian cubs. The authorization itself was extraordinary. Such permits were almost never granted. But Dr. Chen's credentials and research proposal had apparently been compelling enough. The ship's logs contained extensive notes from Dr. Chen. Thexal read them with growing fascination. The recovered data files painted a detailed picture of life aboard the Meridian's Hope before disaster struck. Dr. Marcus Chen had maintained meticulous research logs, documenting every aspect of his groundbreaking study. Thexal found himself reading late into the ship's night cycle, unable to stop as the story unfolded. The 3 Vorashian cubs had been acquired as eggs from a legal research facility. Dr. Chen had raised them from hatching, studying their development under controlled conditions. He named them Razor, Phantom, and Storm. The names came from his 7-year-old daughter Sarah, who had been fascinated by the creatures from the moment they emerged from their shells. Early log entries described typical Vorashian behavior. Even as cubs, they showed aggressive tendencies. They snapped at handlers. They tried to bite during feeding times. They viewed anything that moved as potential prey or threat. Dr. Chen noted that Vorashian cubs in the wild would begin hunting practice at just 3 weeks old. By 6 months, they could take down prey twice their size. But something changed around the 2-month mark of the voyage. Sarah Chen had been spending time near the secure containment facility. Ship regulations prohibited direct contact, but allowed viewing through the transparent walls. Sarah would sit outside their enclosure for hours, talking to the cubs, drawing pictures for them, reading her books out loud where they could see her. Dr. Chen's logs showed increasing surprise at the cubs' reactions. Day 73. Observed unusual behavior today. Sarah was reading near the enclosure, and all 3 cubs pressed against the transparent wall. Not aggressively. They appeared to be watching her. When she looked up and smiled at them, Razor made a soft vocalization I haven't documented before. Need to research if this sound appears in Vorashian communication patterns. Day 81. The cubs now recognize Sarah's approach before she's visible. They respond to her footsteps in the corridor. When she arrives, they become calm and attentive. This is completely contrary to expected Vorashian behavior toward unfamiliar individuals. Day 95. Something extraordinary is happening. During today's feeding, Sarah was present in the observation area. The cubs ate calmly instead of their usual aggressive competition. Razor brought his food portion closer to where Sarah was watching. When she laughed at something, all 3 cubs made that soft rumbling sound again. I believe they're attempting to communicate with her. Security footage backed up Dr. Chen's observations. Thexal watched hours of recordings showing the strange bond developing. Sarah would press her small hand against the transparent wall. The cubs would press their enormous paws against the same spot from their side. She would move her hand, and they would follow the movement. She would run back and forth, and they would pace alongside her, separated only by the barrier. The most remarkable footage showed Sarah singing. Her young voice carried through the ship's audio system. The 3 Vorashian cubs sat completely still, their massive heads tilted in what could only be described as listening. When she finished, they made those rumbling sounds together, almost like they were responding to her song. Dr. Chen's research notes became increasingly excited as the voyage progressed. Day 118. I believe we're witnessing something unprecedented in xenobiological research. These cubs are forming a pack bond with Sarah. Vorashians are highly social within their own species. They recognize pack members through a combination of scent, sound, and behavioral patterns. Somehow, Sarah has become part of their pack structure in their developing minds. Day 133. Today's experiment confirmed my hypothesis. I introduced another adult human near the enclosure, while Sarah was present. The cubs immediately positioned themselves between Sarah and the stranger. Protective posturing. Soft warning growls. They perceived the unknown human as a potential threat to their pack member. When Sarah spoke to them calmly, they relaxed, but remained vigilant. Day 157. The implications are staggering. If Vorashians can form cross-species pack bonds during critical development periods, everything we know about their behavior needs revision. These aren't mindless killing machines. They're sophisticated social predators with the capacity for complex emotional attachments. Sarah isn't their prey. She's their pack. And they would protect pack with their lives. The last entry before disaster struck was dated day 163. Sarah asked today if the cubs love her. I told her that love might not be the right word for Vorashian emotional responses, but watching Razor nuzzle against the barrier where she was standing, seeing the gentle way Storm adjusted his position to stay near her, observing Phantom's distress when she had to leave for lessons, yes, I think they love her. In their own way, and I believe she loves them too. This changes everything we thought we knew. Then came day 164. The day the Meridian's hope died. The disaster logs were fragmentary, corrupted by the same damage that had killed the ship. But Thexal's data recovery team pieced together enough to understand what happened. A meteor strike at 3:47 hours. Small, fast, undetected until impact. It penetrated the ship's outer hull and struck the reactor shielding. The damage triggered a cascade failure. The reactor went into emergency shutdown, but the safeties had been compromised. Radiation flooded the engineering section. The main power grid collapsed. Atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. Backup systems struggled to activate. 73 people died in the first 30 seconds. The captain and bridge crew were killed instantly when the bridge lost pressure. Most of the passengers were asleep in their quarters. They never woke up. Dr. Chen survived the initial catastrophe. Emergency logs showed him in the science section when disaster struck. He immediately went to find Sarah. The ship's internal sensors tracked his movements through corridors filling with smoke and losing atmosphere. He found his daughter in the family quarters, terrified and crying. The logs showed Dr. Chen sealing Sarah in a maintenance compartment with emergency supplies. He told her to stay there. He promised to come back. Then he went to help rescue other survivors. He moved through dying sections of the ship, pulling people from damaged areas. He helped seal bulkheads. He worked with the remaining crew to establish safe zones. For 3 hours, Dr. Marcus Chen fought to save everyone he could. Then a secondary explosion ripped through the ship's center section. The remaining life support systems failed. The temperature began dropping rapidly. What little atmosphere remained was quickly being consumed or venting into space. Dr. Chen was caught in the blast. His biosign flatlined at 0647 hours. He never made it back to his daughter. But something else was happening in the secure containment facility. The power failure had disabled the magnetic locks. The transparent walls required constant energy to maintain their integrity. When the power died, the containment barriers failed. The 3 Vorashian cubs were suddenly free on a ship full of dying, panicking humans. Thexal watched the recovered security footage with his entire command staff. What they witnessed left them all silent. The 3 cubs emerged from their damaged enclosure carefully. They were juveniles, but already massive and dangerous. Each one could have easily killed multiple adult humans. The ship's corridors were chaos. People running, screaming, dying from lack of air or explosive decompression. The cubs ignored all of it. They moved with purpose through the ship. When humans crossed their path, the cubs displayed aggressive posturing, raised hackles, bared teeth, warning growls. But they didn't attack. They were searching for something specific. They were searching for Sarah. The footage showed them tracking through section after section. They used their extraordinary senses to follow her scent. They navigated the damaged ship with an intelligence that surprised the watching officers. When they encountered locked doors, they forced them open with their powerful claws. When corridors were blocked by debris, they found alternate routes. It took them 47 minutes to reach the maintenance compartment where Dr. Chen had sealed his daughter. The door was locked from the outside. Sarah was trapped inside. A human child would have no way to open it from within. The cubs studied the door for several seconds. Then Razor, the largest, began tearing at the locking mechanism. His claws, shredded metal like paper. Phantom and Storm joined him. Together, they ripped the reinforced door from its frame in less than 30 seconds. The audio from the compartment captured Sarah's screams of terror. To her, the door was exploding inward. 3 massive predators were forcing their way inside. Her father had told her to hide, to stay quiet, to wait for rescue. Now monsters were coming for her. Sarah screamed and pressed herself into the back corner of the small space. Her child's mind couldn't process what was happening. She had watched these creatures through transparent walls. She had talked to them, sung to them, felt affection for them, but seeing them up close, in person, free and enormous and terrifying, it was too much. Razor entered first. His massive form filled the doorway. He lowered his head, those crystalline teeth catching the emergency lighting. He moved toward the screaming child, and he made that soft rumbling sound. The sound Sarah had heard dozens of times through the transparent walls. The sound the cubs made when she visited them. The gentle, almost purring vocalization that Dr. Chen had identified as Vorashian pack communication. Sarah's screams faltered. On the recording, you could hear her breath catch. Recognition fighting terror. Razor moved closer. Slowly. His movements were careful, non-threatening. When he reached Sarah, he lowered his massive head further and gently nuzzled against her. The sound Sarah made then was heartbreaking, a sob of relief and recognition. She reached out with trembling hands and touched Razor's fur. The huge predator rumbled again, pressing against her touch. Phantom and Storm entered the compartment. They approached the crying child carefully. Storm lay down beside her, his warm bulk providing comfort. Phantom positioned himself at the entrance, watching the corridor. A guard position. The footage showed Sarah collapsing against Razor's side, crying into his fur. The massive Vorashian wrapped himself around her protectively. All 3 cubs settled into positions that formed a shelter with their bodies. They had found their pack member, and they were not leaving her. Over the following days, the cubs adapted to their new reality with remarkable intelligence. The ship continued to die around them. The temperature dropped steadily. The remaining atmosphere grew thin and toxic. But the cubs worked to keep Sarah alive. Recovered footage showed them exploring the ship. They searched through storage areas and gathered supplies. They found emergency heating packs and dragged them back to Sarah. They discovered thermal blankets and pulled them to their shelter. They even learned to activate some emergency systems by watching the motions humans had made with control panels. Dexal watched footage of Razor standing on his hind legs, studying a heating system control. The big predator touched the interface with his claws, clumsily at first. The system didn't activate. Razor tried again, adjusting his approach. On the 5th attempt, the system powered on briefly, producing a small amount of heat before failing again. "They're problem-solving," Vexen said quietly. "That's tool use. That's advanced cognition." 8. Food became a critical issue. The cubs found emergency rations and brought them to Sarah. She was too young to open many of the packages. Razor learned to tear them open carefully, exposing the food without destroying it. Sarah ate small amounts, her young body struggling with the cold and fear, but the cubs needed food too. They were growing rapidly, their bodies demanding massive caloric intake. The ship's stores were limited. What food remained was mostly in areas the cubs couldn't access safely. The footage showed them hunting through the ship, searching for anything edible. They found a few emergency supplies, some protein bars, survival rations. Not nearly enough for 3 growing Vorashians. As weeks became months, the cubs began showing signs of starvation. Their movements became slower. Their magnificent fur lost its luster. But they never stopped caring for Sarah. When they found food, they brought it to her first. Only after she had eaten would they consume anything themselves. The most painful footage came from approximately 8 months after the disaster. The cubs were now fully grown, each one a massive apex predator. But starvation had taken a terrible toll. Their bodies had consumed every bit of fat they possessed. Their muscles were wasting away. They moved with difficulty, conserving energy. Sarah herself was barely conscious most of the time. The cold, the thin air, the malnutrition, it was slowly killing her. But the cubs maintained their vigil. They kept her warm with their body heat. They positioned themselves to block the worst of the cold air. They made soft rumbling sounds when she stirred, comforting her. Then came the most heartbreaking moment Thexal had ever witnessed in 20 years of salvage work. The footage showed Phantom standing up slowly. His movements were weak, labored. He looked at Razor and Storm. The three Vorashians stared at each other for a long moment. Some communication passed between them. A decision made. Phantom nuzzled Sarah gently one last time. Then he walked away down the corridor. Razor and Storm watched him go. They understood. There wasn't enough food left for all three of them. By leaving, Phantom gave the others a better chance of survival. A few more weeks, a few more days. More time to protect Sarah. The footage showed Phantom walking through the frozen ship. He moved through sections where he and his pack had played as cubs. He passed the shattered remains of their containment facility. He reached a cargo bay at the far end of the vessel and lay down in a corner. He never got up again. His biosign flatlined 3 days later. Starvation and cold finally claimed him. Storm lasted another 2 months. The footage showed him growing weaker each day. Finally, he made the same decision his brother had. He stood, looked at Razor and Sarah, and walked away. He was found collapsed in a corridor 4 sections away, dead from starvation, but his body positioned facing the direction of the alcove where Sarah lay. Even in death, he watched over his pack. Razor held out the longest. Alone now, the big Vorashian maintained his protective position around Sarah. He used the last of his strength to adjust heating packs. He nudged her gently when she stopped breathing regularly, rousing her just enough to keep her alive. He positioned his massive body to provide maximum shelter from the cold. The final footage recovered was dated 3 weeks before the salvage team arrived. It showed Razor barely able to lift his head. His magnificent body was skeletal beneath the thick fur. Every breath was labored, but he still kept watch, still protected, still rumbled softly when Sarah stirred in her unconscious state. The footage ended with Razor slowly lowering his head for the last time. His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. And even in death, he maintained his protective position around the small human child he had loved. The investigation into the Meridian's Hope became the most extensively documented salvage operation in Galactic Council history. Specialists arrived from across the sector. Xenobiologists who had spent careers studying predator behavior. Psychologists who specialized in interspecies bonding. Medical experts who couldn't explain how a human child survived 3 years in conditions that should have killed her within days. Thexal's preliminary report reached the council within a week. The response was immediate and unprecedented. They dispatched a full research team with authority to commandeer whatever resources they needed. This wasn't just about a salvage operation anymore. This was about fundamental questions regarding the nature of consciousness, bond formation, and the capacity for sacrifice across species barriers. Sarah Chen remained in a medically induced coma while her body slowly healed. The doctors didn't want to risk waking her until they could ensure she was stable. Years of extreme cold, malnutrition, and oxygen deprivation had damaged her young body in ways they were still discovering. Her bones showed signs of severe calcium depletion. Her muscles had atrophied significantly. Her internal organs showed stress damage, but she was alive. Against every medical probability, every biological expectation, every logical prediction, she lived. Dr. Kethara, the lead xenobiologist on the research team, spent hours reviewing the footage and data from the Meridian's Hope. She was a species known for their analytical minds and emotional detachment. But even she found herself affected by what she witnessed. "This changes everything we believed about Vorashians," she told Thexal during one of their many consultation meetings. "We classified them as non-sentient apex predators, dangerous animals operating purely on instinct. But this footage shows planning, problem-solving, tool use, sacrifice, These are markers of advanced cognition. What about the bond itself? Thexal asked. How could they form such an attachment to a human child? Dr. Kethara brought up her research files on the main display. Vorashians are pack animals. In the wild, cubs remain with their family groups for approximately 2 years before striking out on their own. During that time, they learn everything from their parents and pack. Hunting techniques, territory recognition, pack hierarchy. The bond between pack members is extremely strong. She highlighted sections of Dr. Chen's original research notes. These 3 cubs were raised in captivity from hatching. They never knew their biological parents. Dr. Chen became their primary caregiver, but his duties as ship's xenobiologist limited his direct contact. Sarah, however, spent hours with them every day. From their perspective, she was part of their pack structure from their earliest memories. But she's not a Vorashian, Thexal pointed out. She doesn't look like them, doesn't smell like them, doesn't communicate like them. No, but she was present during their critical imprinting period. Cubs are highly adaptable. Their brains are designed to learn and integrate information rapidly. Sarah showed them attention, affection, and consistency. She was non-threatening. She made sounds they associated with positive experiences. From a Vorashian cub's perspective, these are all markers of pack membership. Dr. Kethara pulled up the footage of Sarah singing to the cubs. Watch their body language here. Ears forward. Relaxed posture. That rumbling sound they make, we've analyzed it. It's the same vocalization wild Vorashians use when communicating with their young. It means safety, comfort, and pack. They're telling her she's family. The research team spent weeks analyzing every detail of the cub's behavior during those 3 years after disaster struck. They documented hundreds of instances of advanced problem-solving. The cubs had learned to navigate the ship's systems through observation and trial and error. They understood cause and effect. They could plan ahead, searching for supplies they knew would be needed later. Most remarkably, they had made deliberate sacrifices. Look at the timeline, Dr. Kethara explained to the assembled research team. Phantom left the group at the 8-month mark. Storm departed at 10 months. Razor maintained the shelter alone for the remaining 2 years. This wasn't random. This was a calculated decision to maximize Sarah's survival chances. She displayed nutritional analysis data. A Vorashian of their size requires approximately 6,000 calories per day to maintain basic functions. Growing juveniles need even more. The ship's remaining supplies couldn't support 3 Vorashians and a human child for more than a few months. But it could support 1 Vorashian for much longer. So they chose to die so she could live, Thexal said quietly. The implications are staggering, Dr. Kethara replied. This isn't instinctive behavior. This is rational decision-making. They evaluated their situation, understood the resource limitations, and made a choice that prioritized another being's survival over their own. That's not just intelligence. That's altruism, empathy, love. The Galactic Council received regular updates on the investigation. The findings sparked intense debate across the civilized galaxy. Entire academic disciplines were questioning their fundamental assumptions. If Vorashians could form such bonds, could exhibit such complexity of thought and emotion, what did that mean for how the galaxy classified and treated dangerous species? The ethical implications were profound. Vorash Prime remained under quarantine. Thousands of Vorashians lived on that death world, classified as non-sentient wildlife. But if they were capable of this level of cognition, were they being denied rights they deserved? Were the Galactic Council's policies based on incorrect assumptions? Religious leaders from multiple species offered their perspectives. Some saw the Vorashians' sacrifice as evidence of a universal spiritual truth, that the capacity for love and self-sacrifice transcended species barriers. Others argued about the definitions of sentience and personhood. The debates grew heated and complex, but amid all the analysis and debate, one question remained paramount. What would Sarah Chen say when she woke? 3 months after her rescue, the medical team made the decision. Sarah's body had healed enough. Her vital signs were stable. Keeping her in an induced coma served no further medical purpose. It was time to let her wake. Thexal was present in the medical facility when they began the process. So was Dr. Kethara and a full team of medical specialists. They also had child psychologists standing by. No one knew how Sarah would react to what she had experienced. 3 years alone on a dead ship with 3 massive predators, watching them starve to protect her. Losing her father. Surviving the impossible. The trauma could be devastating. They prepared for every possibility. Sarah's eyes opened slowly. The lights in the medical bay were kept dim to avoid overwhelming her. She blinked several times. Confused. Her young face showed fear and disorientation. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry from disuse. A human doctor approached slowly. Dr. Elizabeth Hammond was a specialist in childhood trauma. She had volunteered for this assignment specifically. Sarah, my name is Dr. Hammond. You're safe now. You're in a medical facility. Can you understand me? Sarah's eyes focused on the human face. Some recognition sparked. She nodded slightly. Good. That's very good. Sarah, you've been asleep for a while. Your body was very tired and needed rest. But you're going to be okay. Do you remember what happened? Sarah's face crumpled. Tears began flowing down her cheeks. Daddy, she whispered. Where's my daddy? Dr. Hammond's own eyes grew wet. This was the moment they had all dreaded. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Your father, he didn't survive the accident on the ship. He died trying to help people. He was very brave. Sarah began crying in earnest. The medical monitors showed her heart rate increasing, her breathing becoming rapid. Dr. Hammond moved closer, offering comfort. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. You've been through something very difficult. Through her tears, Sarah asked the question that broke everyone's heart. Where's Razor? Where's Phantom and Storm? Are they okay? Can I see them? The room fell silent. Dr. Hammond looked at the observation window where Thexal and Dr. Kethara watched. They had prepared for this. They knew Sarah would ask about the Verashians, but knowing didn't make it easier. Sarah, Dr. Hammond said gently, can you tell me about Razor, Phantom, and Storm? Who were they? They're my friends, Sarah said, her voice small and broken. They stayed with me when Daddy didn't come back. They kept me warm. They took care of me. Are they here too? They kept Sarah. Dr. Hammond took a deep breath. Sarah, Razor, Phantom, and Storm were very special. They cared about you very much. They did everything they could to keep you safe. I want to see them, Sarah insisted. Please. They must be scared. They don't know where I am. Sarah, I need to tell you something very difficult. Razor, Phantom, and Storm died. They used all their strength to protect you. They made sure you survived. But they couldn't survive themselves. Sarah's reaction was immediate and devastating. She began screaming. Not in fear, but in grief. Her small body shook with sobs. No. No. They can't be dead. They were taking care of me. They promised. They promised they'd keep me safe. Dr. Hammond held the crying child, letting her grief pour out. They did keep you safe, Sarah. They kept their promise. You're alive because of them. They loved you so much that they gave everything to protect you. I don't want them to be dead. Sarah wept. I want my daddy. I want Razor. I want them back. I want them back. I know, sweetheart. I know. The medical team kept Sarah under close observation for the following weeks. Her physical recovery continued, but the psychological impact was severe. She cried frequently. She had nightmares. She would wake screaming for her father or for the Verashians. The grief was overwhelming for such a young child. But slowly, with careful support and therapy, Sarah began processing what had happened. Dr. Hammond spent hours with her each day, letting Sarah talk about her experiences. The story that emerged was heartbreaking and beautiful. Sarah remembered the night the ship was damaged. She remembered her father putting her in the safe room and promising to come back. She remembered waiting in the dark, scared and alone. Then the door exploded inward, and she saw the cubs for the first time outside their containment. "I thought they were going to eat me," Sarah told Dr. Hammond. "They looked so big and scary." But then Razor made that sound. The soft one. The one he made when I visited them, and I knew it was okay. I knew they remembered me. She described how the cubs had stayed with her constantly, how Razor would curl around her to keep her warm, how Phantom would watch the corridors, always alert for danger, how Storm would nudge her gently when she stopped eating, encouraging her to take just a little more food. "They were smart," Sarah said. "They learned how to turn on the heating things. They brought me blankets. They found food and opened the packages for me. They took care of me like parents." Dr. Hammond asked carefully, "Do you remember when Phantom and Storm left?" Sarah's face showed deep pain. "Phantom came and put his head on my lap. He made sad sounds. Then he walked away. I tried to call him back, but I was so tired. I couldn't move much. Storm did the same thing later. I didn't understand then. But I think they left so Razor could stay longer. So there would be more food. Understand?" "I think that's exactly right," Dr. Hammond confirmed. "They loved you so much that they were willing to leave, knowing they wouldn't survive, just so Razor could stay with you longer." "Razor stayed until the end," Sarah whispered. "Even when he could barely move. He still kept me warm. I remember him making the soft sounds, telling me it was okay. And then I don't remember anything else until I woke up here." The research team documented everything Sarah shared. Her perspective confirmed what the footage had shown. The Vorashians hadn't just kept her physically alive. They had provided emotional comfort. They had communicated with her as best they could. They had made her feel safe and loved even in the most terrifying circumstances imaginable. Thexal visited Sarah several times during her recovery. The first time, she was scared of him. His alien appearance was frightening to a child who had just endured such trauma. But he approached slowly, gently, and introduced himself as the person who had found her. "You saved me?" Sarah asked. "My team and I found you," Thexal confirmed. "But Razor, Phantom, and Storm are the ones who saved you. They're the real heroes of this story." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Can you tell me about them? When you found them?" Thexal chose his words carefully. "They were lying in a circle around you, protecting you even after they had passed. They looked peaceful, and even though they were gone, they had kept you warm and safe until we arrived. They never stopped watching over you. Were they good?" Sarah asked. "I've heard people say Vorashians are monsters, are mean and bad, but they weren't like that with me." "No, Sarah," Thexal said firmly. "They weren't monsters. They were your family, and they loved you enough to give their lives for you. That's not something monsters do. That's something heroes do." The investigation concluded 6 months after Sarah's rescue. The final report was thousands of pages long, containing detailed analysis, footage, data, and testimony. The conclusion was unambiguous and revolutionary. Vorashians possessed advanced cognition comparable to recognized sentient species. They were capable of complex emotional bonds, rational decision-making, problem-solving, and deliberate self-sacrifice. They deserved reclassification under Galactic Council law. The recommendations were extensive. Vorash Prime should be studied properly with the goal of eventual integration into galactic society if the native Vorashians desired it. The quarantine laws needed revision. Research into Vorashian intelligence and culture should be a priority. And most importantly, they should never again be dismissed as mindless predators. The Galactic Council debated for months. The decision to reclassify an entire species was not taken lightly. There were concerns about safety, about practicality, about the implications for other species currently classified as non-sentient. But the evidence from the Meridian's hope was undeniable. 1 year after her rescue, Sarah Chen testified before the Galactic Council. She was 8 years old, small and fragile-looking in the massive council chamber. But her voice was clear and strong. "Razor, Phantom, and Storm were my family," she told the assembled representatives from 100 worlds. "They didn't have to save me. They could have left. They could have eaten the food themselves, but they didn't. They stayed with me. They kept me warm. They made me feel safe. They died so I could live." Sarah looked around at the alien faces watching her. "I know they looked scary. I know they had teeth and claws, and they were really big. But they were gentle with me. They were kind. They loved me, and I loved them. Please don't let anyone say they were just animals. They were people. They were my friends. They were heroes." The chamber was silent when Sarah finished. Then, slowly, representatives from across the galaxy rose to their feet. It started with a few, then spread until every single member of the Galactic Council was standing in respect. For Sarah, for her testimony, and for 3 Vorashians who had defied every expectation about their nature. The vote was unanimous. Vorashians would be reclassified as a sentient species with full protections under Galactic Council law. Sarah Chen was adopted by Dr. Hammond, who had fallen in love with the brave little girl during her recovery. They settled on a peaceful colony world where Sarah could heal and grow. She attended school, made friends, and slowly rebuilt her life. But she never forgot. In her room, Sarah kept a picture that Thexal had given her. It was taken from the ship's cameras, showing 3 Vorashian cubs pressing against the transparent wall of their enclosure. On the other side, a small human girl pressed her hand against theirs. All of them together, a family formed across impossible barriers. Sarah also kept the thermal blankets that Razor had gathered for her. She couldn't sleep without them. They still carried a faint scent that reminded her of fur and warmth and safety. On the anniversary of her rescue, Sarah would visit a memorial garden that had been created in honor of Razor, Phantom, and Storm. 3 statues stood there, depicting the Vorashians in their protective positions. People from across the galaxy visited to pay respects to the creatures that had changed everything. Sarah would sit by the statues and tell them about her life. About school and friends and Dr. Hammond and all the normal things she experienced now. She would thank them for their sacrifice. She would tell them she missed them. She would cry and remember. And sometimes, in quiet moments, she would swear she could hear it. That soft rumbling sound. The one that meant safety and family and love. The sound of Vorashians telling her she was pack, she was protected, she was home. 10 years after the incident, Sarah Chen enrolled in xenobiology studies at the Galactic University. Her focus was on interspecies bonding and communication. Her goal was to continue her father's work and honor the memory of 3 Vorashians who had shown the galaxy the true meaning of love and sacrifice. The story of the Meridian's hope spread across civilized space. It became required study in schools. It inspired new research into animal cognition and interspecies relationships. It changed laws and policies. It opened minds and challenged prejudices. But for Sarah, it was simply the story of her family. Of a father who had tried to save her. Of 3 magnificent creatures who had given everything to keep her alive. Of love that transcended species, appearance, and instinct. She had been raised by predators, protected by monsters, loved by creatures the galaxy feared, and she had survived to tell their story, to make sure the universe knew that Razor, Phantom, and Storm were not just animals. They were heroes. They were family. They were proof that love knows no boundaries, recognizes no impossible barriers, and asks for nothing in return except the chance to protect those we care about. Even if it costs us everything, especially if it costs us everything.